Some of the more prevalent concerns that I would have would be the amount of toxic load that our patients are carrying. And that would be both the man-made chemicals as well as the biotoxins that a lot of people are exposed to. And then when you start talking about things like mold and Lyme and Epstein-Barr and some of these bugs, you have to bring in the conversation about how EMF is creating a much more virulent variety of these microbes, which may be...
Yes. Dr. Mindy in the house. All right.
I appreciate that.
The carnivore diet.
Because of what we eat.
Honestly, you've really touched my heart.
So Fast Like a Girl, it's ready for pre-order now. I hope this book changes your life the way the information has changed hundreds of thousands of women that have applied it. From the bottom of my heart, enjoy and let's get healthy together.
Welcome back. I love talking to you, John. So thank you for coming.
Oh, Mindy, I love talking to you too. Thanks for having me.
And what I love the most is you just don't know where the conversation's ever going to go. So, and that's the greatest thing because there's so much depth to your knowledge on all the topics around health.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Here's a burning question that I think you're going to shed some really new light to. When I first started detoxing 7 years ago, or maybe about 10 years ago, when we started detoxing people, detox was very straightforward, or at least it appeared to be very straightforward. It's not so straightforward anymore. And I feel like it's because of this toxic world we live in, but also we have a lot of new tools. So are you finding in your clinic, in your world, that detox is more complicated now than it's ever been, and that we need better tools than ever before?
Yes, absolutely. And, when I first got into medicine, I remember that there was some clinicians talking the same story as far as how much more difficult it is to get patients well. I started out strictly as, a chiropractor, and eventually became a chiropractic neurologist, and then went back to school and became a naturopath. And so my path has just kind of continued to kind of expand. But in the early days, I do remember some of my colleagues that were just doing straight chiropractic would say, hey, I particularly a clinician, his name is Michael Taylor. Are you familiar with Michael Taylor?
No.
He's in Oklahoma. And so he started the first chiropractic internist diplomate program, right?
Cool.
And he's really amazing. And so I started taking his course because I was interested in some of the laws that we were looking to change in Florida that would allow chiropractors to start injecting, because I was interested in starting to perform prolotherapy and PRP, because we were already doing it in our office with other clinicians. And so I took that course, and in the beginning, I remember really being very hesitant, because I was in such a purist as a chiropractor. I really felt like, I wanted to just focus on removing those interferences to the nervous system through adjusting patient's spine and allowing that full expression of health and vitality to come forth with that skill. And then I was hearing from a lot of these other chiropractors that have been in practice for many years that that's just not working, and they're having to utilize things like IV nutrition and saunas and detox methods and a lot of different exotic healing modalities in order to get patients better, whereas before it was a lot simpler.
Yep. Yeah. I've been in so many chiropractic conversations like that, of people who have been, doing chiropractic work or body work in general for so many years. And everybody is saying the same thing. Like, what used to work 25 years ago with body work no longer works anymore. You have to bring in some ancillary strategies. So why do you think that is? Is that purely toxins? It feels like there has to be a bigger reason for that.
Oh, it's for sure multifactorial. And some of the more prevalent concerns that I would have would be the amount of toxic load that our patients are carrying. And that would be both the man-made chemicals as well as the biotoxins that a lot of people are exposed to. And then when you start talking about things like mold and Lyme and Epstein-Barr and some of these bugs, you have to bring in the conversation about how EMF is creating a much more virulent variety of these microbes, which may be compounding things. So you have a higher saturation of toxins, you have this more virulent infection. And so what does that mean? That means that there's going to be more inflammation in the body. And that inflammation is then going to cut down our cellular energy, which is then going to kind of compound the problem even further.
Yeah. And I think EMFs is a really good, an interesting insight. And I want to dive into that because you have some cool strategies you've used to detox, taking that into consideration. What I want to make sure that doesn't get lost, this is like my major message in life, is the body heals itself. And you and I have both grown up in the educational system through chiropractic and all our postgraduate work that believes 1,000% in that. So, So when we look at what's happening to people today, whether it's parasites or Epstein-Barr or heavy metals, like, why is the body not healing? Is it as simple as there's just too much insult to going on? There's too much physical stress, too much chemical stress, too much emotional stress. And then you put us in an EMF filled world and our bucket gets tipped.
Yeah. Well, you have to start talking about hormesis when you start having this conversation, and the hormetic window and the hormetic ceiling. And so this zone that everybody's able to function at before they hit this inability to adapt is really what we're talking about. And so when we have several stressors converging in that are stacking onto that system, where it's bringing it closer and closer to the limit of adaptation, once we hit that limit, then the body shuts down. And, you know, I really dove into this very deeply in the melatonin book, that we had a podcast before, and we talked a lot about melatonin, and we're probably going to speak a little bit more about it today, because it's so important with this conversation. Because ultimately, at a cellular level, we have a resilience, right? And so this resilience is our ability to withstand inflammation to a certain extent before we shut down, right? And so I listened to a really great interview with a colleague of mine, Russell Ryder. He's an MD and a PhD, and he was interviewed on Joe Mercola's podcast recently. And I'd recommend anybody going and listening to that, because it was really good. And what I loved about that interview is that he really broke down this Warburg effect, which is the effect of inflammation shutting down our energy production at a cellular level. And where that energy happens is in the mitochondria. And so Otto Warburg was a scientist that discovered that oxygen and cancer can't coexist, and that there's this switching that happens when a cell hits that limit of adaptation, where it then switches into a much more primitive anaerobic glycolysis is the name of the way it's making energy, versus aerobic. So it's with or without oxygen. So when the cell makes energy with oxygen, it's a robust effect. When it makes it without oxygen, it's about 10% as effective. And so what happens is these stacked stressors are causing our cells to go into this inefficient way of making energy. And he points out very strongly about how this is what happens with cancer, but what's not recognized, and this is something that I'm going on to a lot of platforms, and I'm really trying to preach, is that this is happening with almost all diseases. And this is almost at the core of all disease. And that's why your work with Dr. Pompa's work, Ben Azadi speaks a lot about this. It's like we really are speaking the same language. We're just maybe saying it a little bit different. Whereas we're really trying to help people that are listening to us, our patients in the office, to find out how can they reduce these stressors, finding the stressor, reducing it, so we can get that cell to start making energy efficiently, so that you can express your health and vitality the way that you're supposed to, the way that God meant you to.
So the way I understand what you just said is that when the cell gets overloaded with physical, emotional, chemical stress, those mitochondria start making a signaling molecule that tells all the other cells, hey, we're in danger. let's shut down ATP production, shut down all the natural detoxing of the cell. And so we go into this cellular danger response. And people can be locked there for years. And you could say, okay, I'm not feeling well. I have Epstein-Barr. Let me throw some supplements at it. But really the root of this is to get to that core part of this cellular danger response. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely right. And looking for the most effective and efficient things to start doing, because, for people that are sick, if people are listening to this and they're not feeling well and they haven't for a long time, it can become very discouraging and desperative. And so getting some wins is really important. So I think looking at your environment, looking at ways that you can eliminate toxins, doing some toxic cleansing, not too aggressive. Drainage, I think, is really important. Yeah. Oftentimes when we first start working with patients, we're looking at drainage. Homeopathy can be one of the best routes to do that, because you want your body to be like letting this stuff go, right? And we do that through lymphatics. I like rebounding, breath work, exercising, walking. These types of things are important to kind of move our lymphatics and kind of get that river versus a swamp. I talk a lot about that swamp versus river. And so then what happens is we start to trigger some of these things to detox. We want to make sure we capture these things in the gut with different binders. And I know you talk a lot about that. A lot of this stuff gets caught in the liver and the gallbladder and the gut, and we need to kind of mop that up. But the more difficult areas are the deep cellular structures. And this is really primarily in the cell membranes. Yeah. And so this is usually something that I start with patients a little bit after the first month or so. Usually my initial strategy with patients is to start looking at some antimicrobials, some gut parasite issues, some binders. But then one thing a lot of people aren't really talking about that I think is really, really important, and I'm seeing a lot of people feel better pretty quickly with this, is addressing the sinuses and the nasal passage, right? So having people do like what I call a 30-day sinus protocol. And we like using a product called Glutastat, which has got emulsified oregano, sage, clove, bay leaf, glutathione, NAC, colloidal silver, and some terpenes. So it's really got a lot of stuff in there. And so I'll have people spray twice in each side and do that 4 times a day for a month. If there's more kind of concern for in the respiratory tract, I'll have them nebulize that same product, but in a different form, and kind of go between the two.
And why the sinuses? Again, if I'm looking at somebody listening to the podcast and they're like, I've tried everything, nothing's working. And then we start to open up pathways, and then you go to what I hear is the second step is now let's go to the sinuses. Why the sinuses?
Well, I like to call it doorways, right? I'd say you have to care for your doorways. And I look at the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the intestinal tract through the anus. And so you have like probiotics and like dysbiosis that can occur in the gut there. But up in the head, these are routes of inflammation. So it's been highly documented that the oral gingiva and the health of the mouth can make a profound impact on the amount of inflammation that we have in the body. Yeah. And that gum disease or cavitations in the mouth can trigger a lot of cardiovascular, that can cause stroke, can cause a lot of digestive complaints. And probably a lot of the people listening to this are going to have that as a situation. So some of the easier places to kind of start with the mouth, the nose, and the eyes, we've created actually 3 products that address these doorways. One of which we actually launched just 2 days ago, which is called Irie. And all 3 of them are really interesting in the fact that they burn, right? So the Glutastat.
You like the burning products, huh? I see a trend.
I do, and I'll explain why in a second. But the Glutastat doesn't burn like the Zen. Like we've talked about Zen, it's a meditation mist, but the Glutastat does kind of have like a kick to it, like a wasabi kick. The eye drops, the Irie, is based on this Amazonian herb that's called Sananga. And so there's a burn, and there's also peppermint in there. So, and then with the mouth, there's a product called Boca Zen. Boca is Spanish for mouth, and it's got primarily oregano, cinnamon, and clove, right? And it's got some stevia, and it kind of got some extra flavor enhancing. So you put a half a dropper in the mouth, you move the tongue all around the gums, and then I'll have my patients take a toothpick and push it all between. And I have patients just leave this in their car. And so on their way to work, they do the Boca Zen, they do a couple of sprays. The eye drops are more of something that you want to do when you're sitting and you're kind of silent. Now, what's really neat about these, and the reason that the burning is important, is because there's something called your autonomic nervous system. And this is probably one of the most important parts of your nervous system that you can imagine, because it's what drives all of the healing in your body, because it drives circulation, it drives your heartbeat, your digestion, it just controls your glands. And so it's automatic, so it's not under your volitional control. And there's two sides to it. There's a sympathetic and a parasympathetic side. And the sympathetic is kind of that fight or flight. It's a stress response, which is mostly mediated by cortisol. And then you have your parasympathetic, which is resting and digesting and relaxing, which is primarily mediated by melatonin. Okay. And that part, that's the melatonin part, a lot of people don't realize, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And there's also a whole idea behind this extra pineal melatonin, and that there's most of the melatonin produced in the body is actually made in the mitochondria, and it's existent in the mitochondria to allow for that hormetic window that we talked about earlier to extend out a little bit, meaning that we can handle a little bit more inflammation without shutting down from stressors. So with regards to this burning with the products, you're stimulating something called the trigeminal nerve. And we've been hardwired to have this connection between the trigeminal nerve and the vagus nerve, because if we were to fall into like freezing cold water, we have something called the dive reflex. And so when our face hits a really cold fluid, we have this calming effect. It's this, we have a shutdown, our heartbeat slows, everything kind of slows down, so that if we were in very cold water, we would be able to survive longer. So only the most important faculties kind of stay going at a slow pace. So what that means is that we can use that to actually exercise the autonomics, primarily exercising the parasympathetic nervous system.
Fascinating, because I've become obsessed with my chili pad in my bed, and I love my room cold because it relaxes me. So I hadn't realized that was stimulating to the parasympathetic. It's so fascinating. So one of the things I want to go back to what you just said, when we approach detox, like let's just use, a lot of the stuff you do is so different than your typical detox, which is why you get such great results. And yet, if somebody's really struggling with their health, what I heard you say is, okay, let's open up the lymphatics first, then let's go and look at the nasal, at those three things that you just said. Is it as simple as somebody can go get it off your website, they can start to use it, and now it's another level of detox that they're going to experience? And are you going to see detox reactions? Are you going to see like some kind of Herx reaction?
Well, yes, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
That was packed with a lot of information there. So let me see if I can kind of dissect that out. When you start doing, if you have a lot of microbes, so if you think about this, a lot of people aren't really practicing sinus and nasal hygiene. So when you start to spray something antimicrobial up there, you're going to have die-off of things. And those things are going to then get into your system. That's why you probably want a neti pot and to really kind of clear it out, especially in the beginning. And so it is not uncommon for people to feel a little bad the first couple of days. And then afterwards, we'll generally hear people come back saying that they feel anywhere from 20 to 30% better just with that one strategy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And that pretty quickly. If they come back to you in a couple of days, that's
pretty
fast.
pretty quickly. Yeah. The
Yeah.
other you were kind of asking about, specific kind of protocols and strategies. It's really difficult for us to really put those things out into the public because of the regulations that are out there.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, you kind of have to be either like a coaching client of ours, or, I know you see some people, and Dr. Pompa has a wonderful coaching program as well.
Yeah.
So those are probably some things that people are going to want to start looking towards if they're really wanting to dive into some of these strategies.
Yeah, I've decided in order to get well these days, if you want to go into detox, you need somebody to lead you through it. It's hard when it's so close to you. And there's this whole underground health movement. And I'm going to put you in that category of really cool products. But we can't, because of the regulation, because of the way social media works, we can't talk about it, or we get punished in whatever way that is. So, but what I love about your products, and talk a little bit about this, is, I hear a lot from people they're tired of taking supplements. And then I hear from other people or other professionals, supplements don't work because you're going directly into the gut dysbiosis, and you're putting a nutrient into a dysfunctional gut. But what I love about what you're doing is you're using the eyes, you're using the nose, you're using the mouth, you're using the anus. Your suppositories are incredible. Can you talk about why those are incredible ways to get detox supplements or detox nutrients into your body?
Yeah, well, there's two really interesting reasons with the suppository route of administration. One is that you're bypassing all of the digestive enzymes and stomach acid, which really can be very harsh on a lot of substances. And then you have this, what's called first pass through the liver, which is the liver filters. And that really breaks a lot of nutrients down, sometimes so drastic, like with melatonin, it literally breaks it down where you only get about 1.5% absorption. And the other thing with an oral route of delivery, which is going to be the similar type of thing with an IV, is that you only have a certain window that the nutrients are available to the cell, because ultimately the goal is to get the nutrient into the cells where it can do some work for you, right? And so the cell is constantly kind of feeling for what's outside in the medium outside the cell and pulling in what it can, right? And so if you take something, and there's something called peak plasma, which is really a fancy word for saying how long a substance is outside of the cell available to the cell, right? Most times that's only about an hour. So if we were to take most supplements in a pill form, we'll have an hour or less where the cell has that available, where it can start pulling it in. And the cell has a rate that it can pull things in, and it's generally very slow. So if you were able to have that peak plasma last for 5, 6, or 7 hours, you can see that the cell would ultimately absorb a lot more of that nutrient. And that's what a suppository also gives you. So not only do you avoid that first pass, but you're also getting this very long release, where you have this slow bleed into the bloodstream, where you get this long opportunity for the cells to actually pull those nutrients in.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree with what you just said, largely because we've detoxed using supplements, thousands of people. And lately I've been getting some more, I don't want to call them extreme detox cases, but cases where there's a lot going on toxic load wise. And when we use your suppositories, and I always joke and say, when we come in the back door and we use suppositories, we get better results. Literally, it's crazy. And people have to get past this idea that, suppositories are awkward, because for detox, they're magical.
Well, one thing too is
you would want to do your Lumitol blue suppository in front of your red light, is what I just heard.
Yeah. So the suppository is something that's going to have a long, slow release.
Right.
So that's probably something you'd want to do a good 30 to 45 minutes before you would get in front of any red light or in your sauna or going out into the sun.
Right.
Oral route is probably going to be a little bit better. We had talked about this scientist, Dr. Lima, and his thoughts on the best way to take methylene blue is that when it's mixed with the stomach acid, it works really well. In fact, that might be a great way to do it. It's very convenient. He did not feel that the sublingual route was a very effective way, and that the dosage on a lot of the available sublingual products wasn't really high enough. And so what we like is this suspension in palm oil that is thrown in the back of the throat, and then you drink down so your mouth doesn't turn blue. So a lot of people don't like that, that zombie blue look in their mouth.
Yes, it's not a good look. Let me tell you, I've experimented with that look before. So here's what I hear in everything you're saying is that each nutrient has a different way it will be absorbed into the body. And we can't this is why you've come at this from so many different angles, is that we've got to know the nutrient, know what we're trying to accomplish, and then decide, is it going in the nose? Is it going in the eyes? Is it going in the mouth? Is it going to be a suppository? And experiment with the different entry points into the body, because the gut isn't always the best way. Am I thinking this through right?
Right, exactly. Well, for any type of quantity of nutrients, you're going to want to first look at, I would say a suppository may be even better than an IV, right? Because unless you're hooked up to an IV with a slow drip for 5, 6, 7 hours, you're not going to have that long peak plasma, which really favors cellular absorption, right? Yeah. So then when you start looking at like nasal sprays, there's only so much you can spray up your nose, right? I mean, so nasal sprays can be really good for absorption, especially if you're looking at for something neurologically, like we have an NAD nasal spray, and that's probably one of our more popular products. And, but if you're looking for like full body systemic absorption of NAD versus neurologic, then I would look more towards the neuro NAD suppository, or the Methylmax suppository.
Right. So if I wanted to have more of a brain effect, then I would want to use more of a nasal spray. Whereas if I wanted more of a systemic effect, then a suppository would be better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes perfect sense. NAD is really trendy right now. Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm hearing NAD drips everywhere. What do we need to know about NAD? Because it's expensive. Like, if you're going to jump into it, you need to know what you're doing.
Well, we were probably one of the first clinics to start doing IVs. I think it was in 2005, I went to San Diego and attended one of the first summits on NAD. And it was really, a lot of the science on NAD really came from addiction clinics, because they found that a lot of these addicts, when they gave them NAD, they would be more social, they were happier. It was a lot easier for them to maintain their sobriety. And so a lot of that information started to get out into the, to the alternative medical circles. And so we were literally charging $1,500. And I know there's a lot of clinics probably still doing that. $1,500 for a slow drip of about 1,000 milligrams of NAD, and patients would sit there. They're a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I was going to say, I at that dosage, that I'd be curious how they're feeling.
Yeah. Well, you have to adjust the drip rate so that they can handle it, but they're going to have a little bit of symptoms. So you're losing your day. You're uncomfortable. It's expensive. And so that's why I think the suppository route is so much more. Yesterday I had a patient come in and ask me if I would run an NAD IV on them, and they were, we charge $1,000 to do this drip, and I dissuaded them from it, and I suggested that they go ahead and start with the NAD Max, because Mindy, if you think about it, this is something you can do 3 times a day for like 2 months, right?
Mm.
You can really top off your NAD levels, and then you can maintain it very easily that way.
Yeah.
And suppositories are such a no, it's no big deal. It takes less
No
than
big deal.
you don't
Yeah.
even know it's there. You know,
No.
it turns into an oil, and you got that slow release. And each suppository of the neuro NAD, NAD max is 500 milligrams of NAD, and then 250 milligrams of both precursors. Because there's a lot of controversy. I mean, some of the top experts with NAD even say that you're wasting your time even doing an NAD IV, because they don't think the NAD is actually getting into the cell, and that it has to be a precursor like NMN or NR in order to make some sort of conversion to get into the cell. So what I've done is I've just kind of put them all together, and, you know, we're getting some really good, you know, responses here in the clinic, and a lot of reports from people and our practitioners.
I have to tell a funny story about the first time I met you. And I don't think I told this the last time, because I think I told the Zen spray, but then I love what you're up to. I call you a wizard. You're like a wizard with all this stuff. And I just geek out on all the different ways you're taking these unique substances and getting them into the body. So we were in a hallway. I don't know if you remember this. And you were like, I think you might've given me a Lumitol blue. And you're like, hey, suppository, you're like, try this. And I want to test everything on myself. So I was like, okay.
Yeah,
so I
you're
go
like,
to the
okay.
I go to the bathroom, I put it in, and then I sit down at the conference, and I turn to Jessica and I'm like, hey, I just got to give you a little heads up. Like, John just gave me something. So if something weird happens to me in the next couple of hours, I just went all in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, that's
and
kind of,
I
yeah,
felt
that's kinda
great.
how I roll, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, people, I travel a lot, and, you know, at least a week or so. I just got back from a 2-week vacation, actually. And,
Saw that.
and, you know, it's like, if you catch me in the beginning of my trip, I have a lot of product. I hand it out. I've been fortunate enough to be, you know, hanging out with some pretty amazing people. In fact, last weekend I was in Dallas treating Dana White, who is the CEO and one of the owners of UFC.
That's awesome.
And I've been doing these balloons on Dana, right? And it's like the 4th treatment that I've done on him. And he made this comment to me, Mindy, afterwards. He said, this is one of the best things I've ever done in my life, because he couldn't breathe through his nose. And this is a new book that I've got coming out soon, and it's on endonasal balloon manipulations. I think we could do a whole podcast on it.
Yeah.
But it's this idea of expanding the nasal passage and opening up these cranial plates so that you can have a better movement of cranial rhythm. And this flushing of cerebral spinal fluid that kind of keeps the brain and spinal cord healthy is really, really important. It gets jammed up. And a lot of people become mouth breathers because they can't breathe through their nose.
Amazing.
I wrote a whole book about this, and I'm really excited about it. And actually, when I was with Dana, I knew that Mike Tyson was going to be at the fight that night, and he had invited me to go. And so I made a comment to him. I said, you know, what do you think? You think Mike would do this treatment? And he said, oh yeah. He said, I'll mention something to him. And they sat me literally like 2 seats away from Mike Tyson. So I'm like sitting there, and I've got Mike Tyson to the right of me. I have Jason Witten from the Dallas Cowboys behind me. I mean, all these like crazy famous people. And I'm not really into the violence of fighting, but I could really appreciate what I sensed is these fighters going into this complete now moment and almost being in some sort of a spiritual bliss mode, you know, in the middle of the ring there. And so that was kind of what I was vibing. But yeah, fascinating. So
did you pull out your nasal? Did you just turn to Mike and stick something up his nose?
Well, you know, I didn't want to, I'm going to let Dana kind of run on that, you know, because I don't want to be like a salesman, but I would have said something to him if there was a situation that felt like there was a flow, and I missed my opportunity because I was doing a selfie. I had my camera out in front of me, and literally while you watch this little clip, you see Mike Tyson walking behind me. He moves me out of the way, right? And then in this little selfie, I put this on Instagram, by the way. So if anybody wants to go see this, they can go to my Instagram at Dr. Mitozen at Instagram. And I move out of the way and I'm like, I just got ran over by Mike Tyson. It was really
so fun. Do you know, so when I was growing up, I always say that my mom was like ahead of her time. Like everything that she did with us was natural. And one of the things was when we were sick, we would get in the car and go to the chiropractor and get adjusted. And his name was Dr. Akers. And he would do the worst thing would be like, you'd see him pull that nasal thing out and you'd be like, oh no, here it comes. You know, I was like 7 years old. And he would do it up my nose, like put the air up my nose. It was horribly painful, but then your cold was gone. It was just gone in that one treatment. So you knew the end result was great, but it's crazy therapy.
Yeah, well, and that really makes a lot of sense, I think, for our discussion today. And why would you get better because it always starts in the nasal passage, right?
Yep.
A lot of colds and viruses and bacterial infections, it starts here and then it'll seed down and it can get into your lungs and upper respiratory tract, or it can get into your gut and then it goes systemic, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I love having something like the glutastat in my medicine cabinet or in my car or anywhere, because, as soon as you start to feel that, and traveling is like, I wouldn't travel without some sort of antimicrobial nasal spray, because if you keep that healthy, everything really works really well. So when you had that balloon inflation, he changed you from that swampy to a rivery state, and it just flushed everything out.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, the last thing I want to talk about is something that's actually on Detox that I've been thinking a lot about. You and Ben and Pampa and I all strongly believe in cycling detox. And I've been trying to figure out how we would cycle detox to a woman's hormones, because what I know is when hormones come in very strongly, that's actually a natural detox for a lot of women, because it will release toxins from the tissues. Do you see that there's a proper time to time detox around a woman's hormones? Have you ever thought about that or experimented with that?
Well, I think methylation could be an important conversation to have through processes where there's more hormones, because that's one of the primary ways we kind of clear our hormones, right? Is that detox pathway. I think that oftentimes, I think blood sugar really plays a big role with a lot of hormonal problems. And so, when you start to get into fasting, you start to have such a powerful regulation to those blood sugar issues and insulin resistance, which then leads to that whole host of hormonal concerns. So we look at that very carefully. As far as like actually staging, like when would you do like an extended fast? Was that more of your question?
Yeah. And I know around fasting, I'm more interested in like when we go in with some of these things that are going to create a little more of a detox reaction, like the NNA, like I've seen the Lumitol Blue create a little bit of a detox reaction in some of my patients. So I purposely don't put it in when I know the hormone, like during ovulation or the week before their period, because there's too much going on then.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
And
you might look at something like the Methylmax. I know Dr. Pompa and I kind of work together to formulate that one product. And those are also nutrients that are very poorly absorbed orally. Your B vitamins, your folic acid, there's a whole bunch of other nutrients in there that really don't get absorbed very well. And that Methylmax, I find in combination with NAD to be a really nice combination for a lot of different situations, but especially if you're looking for a high kind of a better brain function, or you're looking to have a day where you need to perform a little bit better, or if you're looking to enhance kind of that phase of detox with methylation.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. You know what I want to do is what Fast Like a Girl will come out in December. And we're looking, once you understand the principles of hormones, you can time food and fasting. but I'd love to look at your products and go, okay, how do we time all these cool suppository sprays? Can we come in to help a woman create more estrogen? And then can we use a different product to help clear the estrogen at a different part of her cycle? For women, I feel like that is the direction healthcare needs to go, because we're in this crazy modern world that we're like an evolutionary mismatch to, living in this chaotic space on this planet that we are. So I love what you're up to. And I'm thinking, how do we use it to support a woman's natural cycle? And I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but I'd love to geek out on it with you.
Well, you know what comes to me, as you know, with all the wearable technology, you know, if there could be a device that could detect your hormone levels, right?
Yes.
Give you, like, you know, and then you could program it to give you suggestions on, oh, it's time to methylate. You know, you just did 2 or 3 days of hardcore dumping of hormones, you know, let's clear those out. I think it's really next level thought process. Yeah.
I've asked several hormone experts how we could create that, and everybody is a little unsure. Now, I will tell you what we're doing with Fast Like a Girl is we're going to create an app where we can start to time all of this for women so they can understand, because most women are everybody's hormonal literate except for those of us in the business. So it's a really interesting concept that I think the time is now for women to understand that where do we come in with these and where do we back off on this stuff. So I think you're the guy to solve that problem for me.
Let's do it together.
I love it.
You bring a lot to the table, and I so respect all the knowledge that you've got with it when it comes to women's health.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Awesome. Well, let me finish up on this thought. I think you were with me last year. So this season with the Resetter podcast, we've been focused on gratitude. Do you? I'm curious if you have a gratitude practice that you do every day, and if it is, what is it? And then, you know, we've gotten into this place where we have been just bitching and moaning about pandemic and politics, and I really want to highlight what people are grateful for. Is there anything that you're immensely grateful for right now?
Well, yeah, I got a lot of things that I'm immensely grateful for. And, you know, right now I'm grateful to be here talking to you and to be able to have the opportunity to reach out to all these thousands of people that are in your listenership. And, you know, I'm finding more and more that, you know, getting out of that place of wanting things, right? It's like the idea of desire, like we want this, we want that. And then this idea of prayer, right? Where we're petitioning, you know, may I have this, may I have that. And it kind of goes back to, I think, the original Aramaic Bible and Yeshua's teachings with gratitude, right? And where you're grateful for already receiving this gift, right? And so when we're desiring something, this is basically putting out to the universe that there's lack, and it really makes sense, right?
Yep.
You want something, it means you don't have it.
Yep.
So you're sending lack out to the universe, versus if you go into gratitude for already receiving it. And I know this is a little shift, because your question was more of like,
no, I love this.
Let's be grateful for what we have.
Yes.
Right. But let's also be grateful for what we want. Right. But then you shouldn't even say it that way. Right. It's like, because that's wanting. Let's be grateful for what we're going to receive in the future.
Yeah. You know, everything that I've studied on law of attraction, and you introduced me to Rhonda Byrne, and I'm so grateful for that interview, is that there is an intention you set of, this is how I'd like life to show up. Then there is a releasing of that. Yes. And not being attached to it, knowing it's going to show up. You just don't know how. And if I go to the feeling, like, what do I want to feel? Every day I set an intention on how I want to feel. Sometimes it's joy, sometimes it's connection, sometimes it's playfulness. But I'm more interested in how I want to feel throughout the day than manipulating the circumstances in my life. And I feel like when we do that, it's easier to be grateful.
Yeah. And, you know, I think our true nature is happiness and love. You know, it's like bliss. This is who we are. And it's in that now moment that exists. And our mind is what gets in the way, because the mind's either in something in the future, in the past, right? But the mind can never be in the current now moment.
Yeah.
And that's really some of the work that I'm really focused on. I was actually with Rhonda, not last weekend, but she was one of the people that I went to go visit. And she literally took me to her teacher, and
Ooh.
such
Well, she doesn't say who he is, so, or her.
yeah, it's a her. It's a her.
Okay.
She doesn't see people anymore.
Yeah.
She was interested in receiving the balloons.
Wow.
So it was
John,
a
that's
really,
cool.
really rare opportunity. And I was able to take a friend as well. And it was profound, because these are people living in what we're talking about right now is one thing, because it's all intellectual, but to bring that in and just completely own that you are happiness, that you are love, and to remove all desire, where you're just, and it doesn't mean that you can't have something that you think about, but you think about it, you let it go, and then it just, the universe just pulls it right into your life. So you can have whatever you want.
Yeah. So
But you
cool.
just, you wind up wanting less, really, because you don't need it, because you're so full without people, places, and things, and so forth, you know?
You know, one of my favorite quotes is nothing fails like success. And why I love that quote is I think once you see that you have everything that you need, your desires really change. And it's because you know that there's nothing you need to feel amazing. You can just feel amazing right now. So
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And next time you go to visit Rhonda, I want to come. So invite me. That's where I want to be on the invite list for that. So
I'm going in September. So
okay.
Yeah.
I'll be down in LA actually middle of September. So if you happen to go at that time, give me
That's about it. We'll conversate off
I would
camera.
love that. I would love that. So how do people find you so they can get all these products if they choose to?
Yeah, so our store is mitozen.com, Mitozen. My Instagram is doctor spelled out, mitozen. And we have a clinic in Sarasota, Florida. It's advancedrejuvenation.us, and that's it.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I'm gonna hold you accountable to take all your products and time them to a woman's hormones. So I want to make sure we connect on that before Fast Like a Girl comes out, because I think that would be so helpful for people. So
let's do it. All right.
Love it. Appreciate you, John. Thank you as always. You've just elevated my thoughts and opened my heart. So thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome, Mindy. Thank you as well. Grateful for you.
Yeah, me too. Back at you. Appreciate you.